Hey guys, what's up? So today I'm building a pedal board, so stay tuned. Okay guys, so this is the Vangoa medium-sized pedal board. We have an 18-inch by 13.5-inch pedal board. We have a built-in power source for all your pedals, and we have some kind of quirky things that they add on to this pedal board that I think are kind of cool, maybe useful, maybe not, and we'll get into them. First up, it comes with this dedicated power supply. It's kind of like a wall wart style. And if you look at it, it's just your standard center positive kind of AC adapter thing going on. And, you know, we have a pretty decent sized power brick here. It's really long, and so that is kind of nice. With it plugged in, we turn it on, and you see we have this strip of lights on the back that kind of light up. What those are is basically a level indicator. There's a built-in microphone here, and so any ambient noise is just basically picked up by this thing, and, you know, it responds to whatever. But on the back side here, there's also these inputs and outputs that essentially you put your input in here, guitar, pedal, whatever. This indicator light will respond to that input signal and, you know, respond accordingly. The output, it's just basically a linear in to out. So that could be good for certain setups, depending on how you like to run your signal flow. If you want to plug your guitar into the top here and then run it out into your pedals into your amp, or vice versa, that could work. It's not a dedicated effects loop, which is kind of unfortunate because that would be kind of cool. And this little knob here allows you to turn down the sensitivity of that input. So, you know, all the way down, there's nothing. And then if you turn it up, then it'll respond. All the way up, obviously, it responds a lot. You might like that, you might not. It's kind of kitschy. I have no clue if it actually indicates any kind of clipping. I know that it will go into red over here if it gets loud enough. But let's move on to the actual pedal board itself and what it really does. Okay, so as we zoom into the actual power section here, what's kind of cool about this is we do have 10 9-volt isolated power supplies, and they're all rated up to 500 milliamps. So basically, any pedal that you can think of that only takes 9-volt center negative will be perfectly fine running off of these. There's a lot of pedals out there that only require really 100 milliamps to operate, but there are some more higher end ones that require like up to 300 milliamps. Well, these are all 500, so they'll cover anything that you got. And then if you move over here, you see we have a 12-volt dedicated power supply up to 500 milliamps. And then we have another 18-volt power supply, but it's only rated up to 300 milliamps. Kind of an interesting thing there. Not sure why that is. Maybe it has to do with the limitations of the entire, you know, power supply here. Either way, you have 12 and 18 volts that you can run higher power pedals off of. To be honest, a 500 milliamp draw is pretty rare for most pedals, unless you're running some sort of like modeler. I don't know. We're not doing that today. We're just going to build a very simple, like everyday, put in front of an amp style pedal board. But first, we need to get this pedal board set up to actually do the thing. So aside from a pretty nifty carrying case, Vangoa also sends out these pre-cut strips of Velcro to put on each of the different rungs here. And in addition to that, they also supply a pretty decent amount of actual power cords that go from this to whatever pedals you have. But first things first, let's go ahead and get this thing Velcroed up. Okay, so now that we have what is essentially the loop side or the fuzzy side down on the pedal board, which is the correct way, we have these leftover hook sides, but most of the pedals I'm going to be using today already have some sort of Velcro on them. So I just have extra Velcro now, but if I ever needed to use some, I have quite a bit here to work with. Now the way I like to set up my pedal boards is in two sections. I'm going to have a preamp or drive and modulation section, and then up top I'm going to go ahead and run what I like to call the loop section, or any kind of EQ or ambient kind of pedals that will go into the effects loop of my amp. So first up, let's go ahead and discuss my in the loop pedal chain. So up at the top here are 4 pedals that I'm going to use in any effects loop for any amp that I put this in front of. First we have a noise gate, and the way I'm going to run this is in a 4-cable method. So basically I'm going to input the guitar, then I'm going to send that signal to the front of the amp through my preamp section that'll be down here later. And then from the output, I'm going to go run through the rest of my signal chain, out into the return of the amp, and then the send of the amp will come back into the return of the noise gate here. And that'll essentially keep my guitar quiet on both the front end and the loop of the amp. Now, the threshold can be, adjusted to meet whatever demands that I need. Now, from that, we're going over to the haunting mids pedal, and this is kind of an unorthodox style pedal to put in an effects loop. However, I'm not using it as a mid boost. What I am going to use it as is a mid contour shaping, kind of like an EQ for my tone, because essentially this is just a mid contour control with the sweep controlling the frequency, and then your cut and boost as well as your output. And then there's also this high-low switch that allows you to either widen or narrow the band in which you're cutting or boosting. It's actually a pretty handy tool to use in an effects loop, and I actually have a video on it where I use it in front of a high gain amp. You can check that out. Next up is the delay pedal. This is where I'm going to get any kind of ambient, kind of time-based tones. I went with a budget option here, a Joyo Aquarius, a very nice, rugged, very versatile setup here, and you'll hear later what this really sounds like. And then I went super budget on my reverb because I don't really use a whole lot of reverb, and when I do, it's just for a little taste of space. This is the Verb Square. I did a review on this pedal as well. Very simple to use pedal, and it just does the job. So that's my in the loop effects section that'll go into the effects loop of any amp that I put it in front of. So let's move on to the next section, which is the before the amp pedals, and that's being fed through the send on my noise gate here, and that'll go into my first pedal over here and then run this way, and then this will go to the front of my amp. Okay, so now I'm to the section of my pedal board that's going to go in front of my amp. And since we're running through the noise gate, through the send, we're going into the input of this Ego 76 compressor from Wampler. Now, I like to put a compressor in front of all of my drive pedals as a way to temper the pick attack and some of the transients that I get as it drives into the signal that I'm going to be amplifying later. Some people like to put these elsewhere, compression after the end of stuff and kind of bring down the level to kind of even it out. I like to do it up front. I think it's just better for my personal taste. The next two pedals here are my main drive pedals. Now, you can recognize this as the classic Ibanez TS9 Tube Screamer. Not much to say about this. It's a very classic pedal. It has the clipping circuit. It has the grit. It has everything that you need to get that nice crunchy tone. And it's there. Right next to it, I have the Lichtlaerm Audio Aquaria. This is a modified Klon circuit pedal. It has three different clipping circuits or clipping types. It has a germanium diode, a Schottky diode, and a silicone diode built in. It has the ability to add a boost of 6 decibels to any signal, a clean boost with an added EQ here. There's a lot you can do with this pedal, and to me, I like to use it after my TS9 here to amplify and kind of give a little bit of a clean boost and a mid kind of roundness to what's going on with the TS9 if I stack them. Otherwise, I can use it as just a standard clean boost with a little bit of grit. Two different flavors of overdrive going on here. They play really well together. You can stack them either direction. If you do this in front of this, it'll just basically drive harder into this and give you a bit more of a saturated tone. I like to use them this way. On to what is a very kind of you don't need this pedal or anything like it on your board if you don't want it. I like to have a little bit of fuzz. You could swap this out with the standard distortion pedal like a Rat or something like that. I prefer this Swollen Pickle, this really big, fuzzy, nasty fuzz tone for especially lead tones. I kind of like the way it does. It kind of gives just a little bit of that gritty filth, and you can kind of use either one of these overdrive pedals to run into this and give it a bit more of just a push. You could really take this whole thing into high gain territory with these three pedals right here. And then at the end of my chain here, before I hit the amp, before I hit the preamp, I have a modulation pedal, which is basically a chorus plus pitch modulator or flanger, however you want to set it up. I have it set up right now for chorus. This is the TC Electronics Stereo Chorus Plus. This is the reissue of a very classic pedal. I actually like the reissue. Some people don't get along with them. I think it's really cool. Has the ability to go stereo. That's kind of why it's at the end of my chain as well. If I wanted to split my signal into two different left and rights, it's there to do so. And it's just a perfectly good way to end your signal chain, running all this drive and all this compression into that. And so this is my pedal board. As you can see, I have space. I have more space to fill. And if you wanted to, you could easily add maybe a phaser or some other modulation effect. You could run a tuner over here. And one thing you could do is actually run this other output on this chorus pedal into a tuner by itself without it going anywhere. And it would tune your guitar in real time. I just don't have a pedal tuner on me at the moment. But I'm going to stick with this. I'm going to get it all powered up, ready to go, and then we'll go hear what it sounds like through an amp. All right, guys, so I got the pedal board set up here. I got everything, plugged into my EVH 5150 Stealth. I'm on the green channel, the clean. Here's my PRS McCarty with the Corrigan PAD in the neck and the Mark II in the bridge. This is like one of my favorite guitars ever. As you can see, I have the pedal board up, kind of blown up here, kind of recording here. I have everything that I showed you guys that I set up before. So here's just my clean tone with a little bit of reverb, thanks to the Donner reverb that I have. And I'm just on the plate reverb. It's still probably one of my favorite settings. Yeah, not bad. Might even bring the effect level down just a tad on that. Yeah, that's more my speed. And if I go ahead and add in just a little bit of delay. Yeah, pretty nice. I'm going to turn down the feedback a little bit on that. This is all running in the loop of the amp right now. Just how I like to run all of my ambient and time-based stuff. I do have my noise gate on here. It's not doing much now because I don't have much gain going on. But with the 4-cable method, it definitely cleans up some of the hiss that you get when you start to add gain. And so let me turn off the delay. I'll keep the reverb on. Let's just turn on this tube screamer real quick, give a little bit of drive, and keep it there. Yeah, classic tube screamer. I'm going to turn up the level just a little bit. I'm going to get the tone up, give a little more bite. Go over to the neck pickup. You can do classic blues stuff with that kind of tone. Real dirty blues. Turn down the drive a bit. Might even turn the reverb down just a tad on the decay. I turn on the compressor. I can get a little bit of up front, just kind of spank. I roll over to something like the Aquaria, which is a clone. More of a clean boost, a little bit of grit. I tend to like to keep it on the germanium diodes. I'll turn the gain up a little bit.
With a compressor, I honestly think anybody who's running a pedal board should have a compressor, because you get some of these unruly kind of overtones when you're playing. You just want to tamp it down a bit. It kind of evens out those transients and keeps those overtones just a little bit more, you know, kind of tucked in. And it kind of pushes that mid-range down just a tad. You want to stack the overdrives, run this TS9 into this clone. Get a bit more volume, turn that down a bit. Definitely gives a bit more bite. I'm going to go ahead and de-blend this a little bit. One of the things it does is it kind of scoops out a little bit of that bottom end and makes it just way more kind of like cut. And if I roll over to the loop section again and I engage this haunting mids, what I do is I have it pull out a little bit of the mud frequencies. Gives it a little more clarity, a little more bite. If I turn off the reverb, you can hear it a little bit better. And that comes in really handy when I go into more high gain stuff, for sure. I'm going to keep the haunting mids on. I'm going to go ahead and roll over to my swollen pickle Fuzz. And I'm going to go ahead and go back to the bridge pickup. Turn the compressor off. Actually, maybe turn it back on. I'm going to turn the boost section of the Aquaria on. It's just basically a clean 6 decibel boost, but it has a built-in EQ that I can use to kind of shape up a little bit of that pre-EQ. Yeah, it can get pretty nasty. You can also drive the tube screamer into the Fuzz. Without that compressor. And lastly, I have my chorus pedal here, and it's just a really nice chorus sound. Yeah, it sounds pretty good. I think you could just do a lot of your tone shaping up front with these pedals without even touching the amplifier. And to be honest, this isn't just for pedal platform kind of thing in front of a clean channel. Honestly, this type of board with all these different things could be used for multiple genres, including like heavier, metal stuff. I mean, I have 2 drive pedals on here. I even have a fuzz pedal, all of which can be utilized for some pretty gnarly tones. I do have that haunting mids in the loop, and I have a pretty good noise gate. Things like chorus, delay, reverb, click those off for a minute. Don't worry about the compressor right now. I'm going to click over to the blue channel on here and get it a little bit more aggressive. Okay, so I'm on the blue channel here. It's kind of like the crunch high gain channel, not quite as high gain as the red channel, but it's also not as compressed, so it's a little bit more my style. I don't know. I just really like the blue channel on the stealth. Not super aggressive right now. Gain is only about like just below noon. If I turn off the noise gate, the noise gate works perfectly fine, especially in 4-cable method. I'm going to turn on the tube screamer because in my case here, if I were to do a pedal board like this, I would set up one of the drive pedals to be my boost pedal and the other one to be kind of my crunchy kind of, gritty lead pedal for, not quite as aggressive stuff. And I'm going to keep the Aquaria as that. And then we'll touch on the swollen pickle and the haunting mids in the loop here in a minute. But here's what I got with just the Ibanez Tube Screamer engaged with this pedal board. Pretty good. If I engage the haunting mids in the loop, and I've done a video on this particular pedal in the loop, it's kind of like a cheat code. It kind of just opens up the sound when I scoop out some of those muddy frequencies. Yeah, it just kind of tightens it up and gives it a little bit more fidelity, I guess you might call it. Lastly, I pulled out this 8-string guitar. This is the Schecter PT8, the blackout, with the open pore, black matte finish, single Fishman open core modern pickup. Because I'm going to turn on this swollen pickle with this high gain and get really nasty. But here's what I got, just the high gain tone with my tube screamer. In droppy, it sounds really good. I got that noise gate tacked up there pretty high. If I turn off the tube screamer, engage the swollen pickle, here's what I got for what I like. Yeah, that's pretty gnarly. Anyway, that's my pedal board build. I'm going to leave you guys with that. Hopefully you got something out of this. Leave a comment below. What do you think I should put on this board? What would you put on a pedal board for yourself? Let me know in the comments below. See you later.